Hi, I'm Laura Nelkin. I'm a knitwear designer. I live in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region, and this is the companion video for Clue 3 of Into the Hoods Mystery Knit Along. I'm so thrilled that you all are knitting along with us. And for Clues 1 and 2, I have kept everybody knitting together. Clue 3 is where things get a little crazy because it is time for our trails to diverge from each other. You have 3 different possible shapes you could be knitting: the balaclava, the dicky, or the scarf. And you might be knitting with one color, or you might be knitting with 2 colors, which means there are 6 possible trails that you are about to take, which means my world is about to get a little bit crazy. So I'm going to make a request. If you ask for help, either below this video or in either of the forums in Ravelry group or in the Facebook group, when you go to ask a question, please let me know if you are making the 1 color or 2 color version and whether you are knitting the balaclava, the dicky, or the scarf. If you don't let me know that, the first thing I'm going to ask you is which version you are knitting, and it's going to take longer to get you help. So promise me that you'll do that, okay? Next up, for the last 2 clues, everybody has gotten the same file, like the same PDF, and that PDF had instructions for 1 color and instructions for 2 color. Now that our trails are diverging, what I've decided to do is split up the pattern into 2 different files. One file is for 1 color and one file is for 2 color. So if you're knitting the 1 color version, you'll be following that PDF. If you're knitting the 2 color version, you'll be following that PDF. What it does is make it so that what you're downloading is not 25 pages with 12 of those pages being pattern information you don't need. I think it's going to help a lot with people getting confused about where they are in the pattern. So make sure that you have downloaded the pattern for the style you're making. You have both patterns, so if you're knitting more than one or you want to knit one later, you've got them both in your library. Important for me to tell those of you that are watching this video that have not purchased the pattern that this is merely a tips and tricks video. It is a companion video. I'm not going through every stitch and every step of the pattern. I'm just going through techniques and highlights and things where I think that you're going to have questions and where a video will help you have success knitting it. I'll give you a link below to the pattern if you would like to purchase it and knit along with us. So without further ado, now that I have made all of that make sense, I want to jump right in, and we're going to jump right in with the single color dicky and balaclava trail because those both start together. Okay, if you're knitting the single color balaclava or dicky, you're going to want to watch this tip. When you finished working clue 2, you had, let's see, you had 84 stitches on your needles. Underneath the camera here, I have a tiny little version of a hood. Through clue 2, I clearly have fewer than 84 stitches on my needles. So the beginning of clue 3, you're going to start by joining this hood into the round. And you're going to do that by casting on a few more stitches, 5 more stitches to be exact, and then decreasing down one of those stitches so that you end up with, I want to make sure I tell you the correct number, you're going to end up with 88 stitches when you are done working the setup round. So let's go ahead and look at this together. You're going to start with the right side facing and needle C. If you want to, you can grab your needle C and use that as you're working the first setup round, or you can transfer all of your stitches onto needle C like I have done. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast on 5 stitches onto my left-hand needle with a cable cast on. A cable cast on has you taking your right-hand needle, going in between the 2 stitches on your left-hand needle, wrapping your yarn around, and then putting that stitch onto your left hand needle. And you're going to do that a total of 5 times. So this is my second one. This is my third one. You want to make sure not to split your yarn like I just did. This is your fourth one. And then this is your fifth stitch. So that is 5 stitches cable casted onto your left hand needle. And now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to turn my work, and I'm going to join myself into the round by slipping the first stitch on the left hand needle to the right hand needle. And then I'm going to pass the second stitch on the right hand needle over to the left hand needle. And then I'm going to knit 24 stitches and place a marker for the end of the round. As you go to work around, so let's pretend I'm knitting this 24 right now. Remember, my hood is smaller than your hood. As you work around, when you reach the other markers that you had on your hood for the single color hood, you're going to remove those markers. So you'll end up with only one marker on your hood marking the end of the round. When you finish this, set your needle bee aside. You're not going to be using it again for the balaclava. You will use it again if you are working the dickey. So once you're all set up working in the round, you're going to start working some 2x2 broken rib. And I can show you on my needles what that looks like. I'm set up over here for the 2-color version, but if you've never worked broken rib before, this is what broken rib looks like. You'll see that you have knit columns that are clean knit columns, and then you have purl columns that are broken up by a knit round in between. I really love working 2x2 broken rib, and I think you're going to have a really fun time working this. If you worked your ribbing with combination ribbing when you were working clues 1 and 2, you can continue doing that with your purls if you want, but you don't have to. I don't think it's as necessary when you're working broken rib. If you are working the balaclava, you're going to work this section until your work measures around 5 inches, which is 13 centimeters from the beginning of that setup round. If you are working the dickey, you're going to work about 1.5 inches. This is all written into the pattern. If you're knitting the balaclava, when you're done with that 5 inches, do not cut your yarn and wait for clue 4 to come out. If you are working the dickey, we're going to talk about something. So let's do that in the next chapter. Okay, if you're working the single color dickey, you get to work some German short rows to build up the back of the neck. Short rows are worked so that you have extra height in one area of your knitting, but not all the way around. And I'm going to show you how I love to work short rows. It is important for me to tell you that when you go to work the dickey, you want to switch to needle D. You were on needle C for that broken ribbing. Needle D is the same size that you use to get gauge, but it's 16 or 20 inches around. So it's a smaller circumference than needle B. So switch over to needle D, and then let's just look at how I work short rows and questions that I think are going to come up for you. So I've just got a few stitches on my needles so I can show you how to work the DS on right side and wrong side rows. And I've worked not quite up to the end of this row. And what I'm going to do is turn my work so the wrong side is facing, and then I'm going to slip the first stitch of the left hand needle to the right hand needle, and then I'm going to bring my yarn up and over the right hand needle. And if my next stitch is a purl stitch, I'm then going to bring my yarn to the front of my work and purl that stitch. But if my next stitch is a knit stitch, I would leave my yarn to the back. In this case, my next stitch is a purl stitch. So I'm going to bring my yarn to the front of my needle, and then I am going to purl across. In the pattern, this is called a DS, which stands for a double stitch. This is also written into the abbreviations if it's easier for you to follow written words. When you get to the point in your pattern where the pattern says to turn, you're going to turn your work again. In this case, my right side is facing. I'm going to bring my yarn to the front of my work. I am going to slip that next stitch on my left-hand needle and then bring my yarn up and over my needle and begin to knit back across my work. If the pattern says to knit to 4 stitches before the DS, you can see that I already just worked one too many stitches. So if the pattern says to work to 4 stitches before, there's my double stitch right there, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So if the pattern says, for example, DS, knit to 4 stitches before DS, turn, I would be right there, and then I would turn my work around, and then I would DS and work back in the opposite direction. I hope this makes sense. This is just a quick little video. I do have a longer blog post about German short rows that I'm happy to link below. That video is quite old, so I wanted to make kind of a freshie for those of you that haven't worked this technique before. There's a few different ways to work short rows. Another is a wrap and turn. I don't like to use it in this circumstance because we're working stockinette stitch, and I find that the short rows get hidden much more neatly when you work German short rows. And that brings me to the next step. When it is time to work all the way around and you're done working short rows, what you're going to do when you come to that DS is just come underneath both of those stitches and work them together as one. And I think what I'm going to do is turn my work and show this to you from the right side of the work, because you're going to be working this much more often from the right side than from the wrong side. So I am on the right side of my work and I am knitting across, and when I come to that double stitch, I'm just going to go into that double stitch, wrap my yarn around, and pull it through, and you will find that that double stitch just gets hidden right behind the stitch that you have made. Very slick and very easy. The fuzzier your yarn is, the more that double stitch is going to be hidden. So you can see again, I just worked into that double stitch and it's hidden. So that's for those of you who've never worked short rows before and or needed a little refresher on short rows. Now that we've covered that, you're going to finish through the instructions for the single color Dickey, and then you're not going to cut your yarn and you are going to wait for clue 4 to be released. Okay, those of you working the single color scarf, this is a very fun trail. I don't have a lot to show you, but if you look underneath the camera here on the little mini version I have from the end of clue 2, I am going to start by working across my stitches to the halfway point. Of course, I don't have as many stitches on my needles as you have on yours, but basically what happens with row 1 is you're working to the halfway point at the back of the neck, and then half of your stitches, the second half, are getting put on a piece of stitch saver. I can show you how easy that is to do. And then you will be turning and working back and forth along the first half of stitches. These stitches, when you go to put them on the stitch saver, you're just sliding them on and holding them. I think the most basic thing a piece of stitch saver can do. Then, once you've started working across these stitches, you're going to be working some short rows and building up the back half of that scarf right there, so it fills in around your neck to keep you warm. If you've never worked short rows before, you can follow the section that I just showed for working the Dickey. I go over how to work DSs on right side and wrong side rows, so that section might be helpful for you to watch. Things to keep in mind when you're working the one color scarf are: one, that I don't write in slip marker, so while your markers are still there on your needles, you'll just be slipping them when you come to them. Two, just as before, if you did that double wrap on the edging of clue 2, you're going to continue doing that, and that double wrap on the edge does not count as a stitch, so remember not to count that as a stitch. And third, and most importantly, you're going to be continuing and working with needle B for all of clue 3. So you won't be switching to any other needle while you're working clue 3. Clue 3 is written out row by row. Make sure to print out those pages and you can just check off each row as you've worked it, if that helps you keep track of things. I am around if you have any questions, but it's very easy knitting, and if you've made it through clues 1 and 2, I am not worried about you making it through clue 3. So that's everything I have to tell you about the single color scarf. I feel like I'm cheating a little bit, but not a lot to show you on the needles there. Okay, those of you working the 2-color version of the Balaclava and the Dickey, this section is for you. You have finished working your clue 2 with 2 rows of CC, and you should have, I believe, 84, you had 85 stitches on your needles. We'll double check that from the pattern, but I'm pretty sure it was 85 stitches on your needles. This setup round that you're going to work is going to end up joining your little hood into the round, and we're going to start by casting on a few stitches with a 2-color cable cast on. So I'm going to show you how to do that together. So if you look down under the camera right here, I have my hood, my little miniature version from Clue 2, all ready to go. And I've got my contrast color in my hand, and I'm going to go ahead and cable cast on 1 stitch using needle C. And I'm cable casting on by going in between the 2 stitches on my left-hand needle, wrapping the yarn around, pulling it through, and then putting that stitch on to the needle. And then what I'm going to do is lay my contrast color to the right and bring up my main color, or my MC, so that I am ready to cable cast on with the MC. And then I am going to put that stitch onto my left-hand needle. And now I'm going to take my MC and lay it to the right and bring up my CC. I'm going to end up doing this so that I have cast on a total of 6 stitches. It's going to end up being 3 of the CC and 3 of the MC that I am casting on to my left-hand needle with a cable cast on. This was fun to figure out how to do so that my yarns were in the right place for working around. And now I've got those 6 stitches cast on, and continuing with my my main color and my needle C, you're going to start to work all the way around your hood. And I'm going to work around, but I'm not going to make you watch me do every step. So you'll see that at first you knit 10 stitches, and then you're going to work a slip, slip, knit, and that is just decreasing down a few stitches. See if I've gotten my 10, 3, 6. There we go. Slip, slip, knit. And now you're going to work all the way towards the end of your row. Okay, I've knit to my last 6 stitches, and now I'm going to knit 2 together and knit 4. And now I'm going to join myself into the round by slipping the first stitch on the left hand needle to the right hand needle and then slipping that second stitch over. And now I'm joined into the round, and you can place a marker right here for the beginning of your round. And now you're set up to start working your broken rib in the round, and you're going to knit 2, purl 2 around. This broken rib is really fun to work. I'm just going to grab another little swatch over here to show you a trick with the broken rib, because you're going to work it in a 2-color repeat, and I have a little trick to make that join as you are working up seamless that I really like. Let's say jogless instead of seamless. Okay, if you look underneath the camera right here, you can see that I have some 1-color broken rib. If you're working the 2-color version, you're going to have 2-color broken rib that has stripes of the main color and the contrast color going up. But what happens when you go to work those stripes is that you'll notice at the end of the round, if you don't work this trick, you can end up with a point where the last stitch is on a different round, like 1 round above where the first stitch of the round is. And the trick to that is on ribbing rounds 2 and ribbing rounds 4 to go with the right hand needle and lift up the right leg of the stitch below the left hand needle and put that onto your needle, and then knit that together with that stitch. And what that will do is equalize the very beginning of the round and make it so much neater and tidier. You don't have to do that. I have written it into the pattern, so it is pretty easy to do. And I think that it is worth doing that extra step. So you're going to end up working this 2x2 broken rib in 2 colors. If you're working the balaclava, you're going to repeat rounds 1 through 4 a total of 9 times. And if you're knitting the balaclava, you're not going to cut your yarns, and you're going to wait for clue 4 to come out. If you're knitting the Dickey, you're going to work rounds 1 through 4 of that striped ribbing a total of 3 times, and then you're going to jump ahead to working the short rows. So let's talk about that in a second. Okay, this little section is for the 2-color Dickey trail only. If you are working the 2-color Dickey, after you've worked your broken rib section, you are going to cut your CC yarn and leave your MC yarn attached. And then you're going to want to switch over to needle D, which is the same size that you use to get gauge, and you'll be using MC. Needle C is a smaller circumference. It's a 16-inch or 20-inch round circumference. You could do this on double pointed needles if you didn't have a smaller circumference needle, or you can do it on magic loop if you have that. This section for the Dickey, you'll be working short rows to build up the back of the neck so that your Dickey fits you beautifully. If you have never worked double stitches or German short rows before, they are written into the pattern, but I also went over that in the 1-color Dickey section, so you can jump back and watch that chapter if you need a refresher on working German short rows. So after you have finished those German short rows, do not cut your yarn and wait for clue 4 to be released. Okay, those of you working the 2-color scarf version, you're going to have so much fun knitting this. I'm really excited to start to see photos of yours coming off of your needles. There's a few things to keep in mind as you are working the scarf version. One, as before with the edging on Clue 2, those double reps do not count as a stitch. So make sure that you don't count them as a stitch if you're double checking your stitch count on your needles. The other thing is that you'll be continuing with needle B for all of Clue 3. So you're good to go with the needle that you are on for working Clue 2. The first thing that's happening in your setup rows for the scarf version is that you are splitting your stitches and only working across half of them for the scarf section in Clue 3. So you can put your stitches on scrap yarn as you're going to work them in the, I believe I have you do that in the first row after the 2 setup rows. So you can use a piece of stitch saver, you can use scrap yarn, whatever you want for holding your stitches. After you work the setup rows and you start to get into working the short row section, what you're doing is kind of building your scarf a little bit so that it's longer along the back of the scarf to kind of fill out the fabric a little bit. And as you're working those short rows, if you've never worked short rows before, I did go over how to work short rows in the one color, sorry, Dickey section of this video. So jump back and watch that if you've never worked short rows before. But what I want to do on my needles right now is show you how you're going to hold your yarn along your work as you are working with 2 colors and doing short rows, because this might be new for many of you. So right here, if you look down at my needles, you will see that I am right at the end of row 4 of the short row wedge. So I'm just kind of like having a little cheater swatch right here. It's not attached to a hood. And row 4 is a wrong side row. So it has you working until you're basically 3 stitches before the end right there. And then it says to turn work. So let's turn our work together. And now I am working row 5 of the pattern along with you. And what the pattern says is with main color, which is what I have on my needle right now, work a DS. So I'm going to bring my yarn to the front of my work. I am going to slip that next stitch and I'm going to bring my yarn to the back of my work. And then it says with CC knit 2, carrying yarn along the back of your work. So you'll see that my CC is right there. And what I'm doing is just making sure that my main color is laying to the left so that the CC is grabbing it as I go to knit that stitch. And then when I go to knit the next stitch, I'm just going to bring that main color up and over right there. And what that's doing is carrying your main color along the back of your work so that it is in the right position when you go to work a short row in the next rows. When I didn't do that, your color was like 2 stitches farther away and it was making this unsightly little float along the back. So I solved that problem by carrying it along. So once you've carried it for those 2 stitches, then you're just going to continue along, not carrying the main color until you get to the last 2 stitches of your scarf. And then you're going to slip one with yarn in front and then knit one. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that so you can see what's happening here. And now I'm going to slip one and then I'm going to knit one. And now I'm on row 6. And same with I'm with the CC again, and I'm going to slip one, and then I'm going to knit one, wrapping yarn twice. This should be familiar for you. And then I'm going to slip one, and then I'm going to knit to 2 stitches before the DS. And I just want to show this to you in case this is a point of confusion for anybody. So I'm knitting along, and that is my DS right there with the MC. So I've got 2 CC stitches right there. And now I am going to turn my work. And what's going to happen right here is I'm going to make a DS with my CC, and then I'm going to leave it to the left. and I'm going to knit 2 with my MC, carrying that CC along the back. So just like we did before. And then I'm going to continue across with my MC. You're going to start to notice as you work the scarf that you only have bush stitches coming along the outside edge of the scarf. They're not in the main body of the scarf part. It made it too bulky and heavy to have bushes throughout. So I just had a nice little bush edging happening down your scarf. So definitely let me know if you have any questions about that. I know that little maneuver might be new for some of you. Okay, that was a lot to go over in clue 3. I told you it was going to be a little crazy with all of you doing different things. I'm the one who decided to have 6 different versions in this mystery knit along. So that's everything I think you need to know. Remember, if you ask questions in either the Ravelry group or the Facebook group or below this video, let me know which version you are making so I know how to help you. It will just make the process much faster if I know which version you're doing. We have one more clue to Into the Hoods. It is clue number 4. It comes out on November 19th. So that means I'm giving you an extra week. And I'm doing that so if any of you are knitting more than one hood, you have time to catch up with all of those hoods and all be ready to go for that final clue on November 19th. So excited to see your Into the Hoods come to life. Happy knitting.